Please join me as we just go to God for his message today. So, Father God, we just thank you again for today. We just continue to just surrender ourselves to you, God. Just continue to surrender our hearts to you. We just pray that you can keep filling us up with love, not just for each other, but really, God, love for all your children throughout the world. We just continue to pray for everything that's going on in Ukraine, all the new war in Israel, God. We know that your heart's hurting, God, as you see this pain going on. And we just pray that you continue to inspire people to really be bold and help all those in need to be able to provide that shelter. And we just pray that all the churches around the world, God, are really inspired to find ways to provide that shelter and love and really just provide homes for those that are displaced and that have lost everything and are on the run, Lord. And so we just continue to pray for your heart and that we can find ways to do more missions, more things here in our lives every day that you give us. And so we just pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. We actually have a very similar message. One of the verses I have, you used it, so it's going to tie in very well. But really today we're going to be talking about being torn between heaven and Christ. And so the verses that we're going to be looking at is Philippians 1, 19 through 24. And so you guys can read it with me. It's on the handout and it's up on the screen as well. And it says, "Yes, and I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account." And so Paul here is kind of opening up his heart, right? He's telling these people that he's torn, right? He wants to be in heaven. He wants to really be with Christ. And it's important to understand his situation, right? He's in jail. He's been beaten. He's been constantly suffering for sharing the gospel. So for him, he deserves to be in heaven, right? He has done all that he's needed. He's done all that he can to really share the gospel, and he suffered for it, and he's like, I really want to be in heaven to see it over. But yet he's willing to want to stay because he knows he can help develop their faith more, help prepare all those people to endure more, and be able to keep spreading the gospel and get more and more people to safety, right? More and more people to freedom in Christ, more and more people to eternal life. And so this is where he's like, heaven is one of the greatest things that we can imagine, right? So you have to think, how can he be torn between the two? Because for him, he's like, to really be there for people, to really share Christ, there's also nothing better than that. There is nothing better than for someone to get Christ. He knows that feeling. He knows how powerful it was in his life to get Christ. And there's nothing better. The only equivalent is heaven. Those two things, right? And literally, you got to get Christ first to get heaven, right? So, but this is how he understands it. This is where he's feeling it. And so throughout this whole section, he's kind of doing these back and forth. He's showing what he gains versus what everybody else gains. So for him, dying is personal gain, right? His suffering ends. If he lives, he's going to suffer, but other people will gain a lot of things. He shares Christ. He's sharing Christ, honors Christ with his life, but also dying for Christ honors him as well, right? Because it's not just dying because of old age or things like that. He's saying, if I die sharing the gospel, that is the best way to share Christ, right? That is the best way to establish my love for them, that I was willing to give the ultimate sacrifice. He compares being in heaven is what we should all desire, but he also shares that we also have the desire that everybody should be in heaven. These are the two things we're supposed to be torn between. And we're also supposed to be torn between being with Christ versus being Christ to others. This is where Paul is stuck in the middle. He wants to have this heart of like, they're both so great of options, I cannot choose between the two. We'll see what his choice is later. But this is where you have to ask yourself, do you live in that tension? Do you live like I'm torn between heaven and living for Christ right now? For me, I feel like I've met a lot of Christians that they're always kind of like, man, I can't wait to go to heaven. I can't wait to be there. I want Jesus to come now. I want him to end all these things. And I get that, right? But at the same time, there's still so much work to be done here. There's still so many people that are not saved yet. If Christ comes now, that puts an end to the possibility of more people coming, right? But even when we talk about heaven, a lot of people are like, I can't wait to be in heaven with my family and friends, right? My loved ones. And so it's kind of like, that's it. Once your loved ones and family are saved, you're like, that's all I care about. We're good. I can't wait to go. but there's so many more people out there. There's so much future family, future friends that we're supposed to be wanting to be saved. Right? Because even now, I think we're talking about, like, we know churches are very divided. Churches are not unified. Even in our own church, right? There's small pockets, groups, where we don't always get along. And we're kind of like, I can't wait to go to heaven and then just be up there and be with the people I want to be with. Can you imagine if we get to heaven and you're like, okay, I got all my friends and family here, I don't want to talk to anybody else for the rest of eternity. I don't want to talk to them on earth. I don't want to talk to them in heaven. Right? Can you imagine when we're up in heaven and you're with your family and somebody sees you like, man, we went to church together. Like, I wanted to always know you more. I wanted to spend time with you. We never got a chance. Now we get to in heaven. You'd be like, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Like, you go, you take that part of heaven. Right? I'm going to take this part of heaven. Let's never see each other again. If we were to do that in heaven, that would cause that person some pain and sadness, right? When you're rejected, you feel pain and sadness. If we're not willing to want to be with everybody right now, then basically we're not making heaven what it should be. Because we're going to take that same division up into heaven. We're going to take that same heart that causes pain and suffering. Does anybody want that kind of heaven? I know I don't. Right? None of us want that. Even a lot of people are like, I can't wait till Jesus comes. I want him to come right now. I'm always like, I can see God saying, like, I don't want to come right now. I don't want Jesus to come right now. Because all it's going to mean is you guys are going to bring your mess up to heaven. You ain't ready for heaven. Right? It's like, don't bring your junk up here. Don't bring your baggage. Don't bring all that stuff up here. So in many ways, because that's where we see heaven, it's like wipe away. It's going to wipe away all tears, right? There's all this pain, all these things. It's great stuff. And so that's where God's saying, like, why wait? Do it now. You can start building those relationships. You can start working on unity. Learn how to love each other right now. Prepare yourself for heaven because you're all going to be up there together. Do it now. This is what Paul's kind of, if you read his writings, every single letter he writes, he stresses unity so much because this is what he understands. That's what heaven's going to be. Every person unified, every person loving each other, every person really being together, a true family. Having a home all together. And that's what you have to ask yourself. Are you even ready for heaven? Would you really want to spend time with everybody? Right? All you guys, man, you're stuck with me. All right? But I don't know if you want to be, I want to be stuck with you guys, but I don't know if you want to be stuck with me. Does that make sense? But that's what we're talking about. This is the understanding. This is what Paul is believing. I need to keep preparing them. I need to keep working on them. I need to help them get past all their baggage. Get rid of all this pain, all the hurt that they cause each other so that they can really enjoy life now. And then it'll be that much easier when they get to heaven. And so one of the things that I look at when Paul is talking about this, when he's torn between the two, right? We know what heaven is, but the reason why he's torn and he wants to stay on earth is because he knows he can bring heaven to people here on earth. We don't have to wait. There's a lot of writings where, like, you get God now, you get the Holy Spirit now, you get a taste of all these things, right? You get a taste of heaven now. You don't have to wait. Everything down the road will be better, but it all should start now as soon as you get Christ. And so there's this idea of bringing heaven to people here on earth. That's what his purpose is in living. He just doesn't want to live. He wants to live to bring heaven here on earth. And that's where he kind of says in verse 20, Christ will be honored in my body with my life. Verse 22, if we are to live, that means fruitful labor. He's telling you why he wants to live. And that is to live for Christ, use his body to honor Christ, to do what Christ did on earth, and to have that fruitful labor that produces people getting heaven. And so we have this idea of being able to bring heaven to earth. And for me, I've always seen this come from Jesus himself, right? Does everybody know that song, What a Beautiful Name? Prepare for the best vocals. But in the lyrics, right, it says, heaven, you didn't want, there is just smiling. He's like, Jesus, you didn't want heaven without us, so you brought heaven down to us, right? We sing that song, we celebrate that. But this is where, like, Jesus kind of established this in his ministry of starting the kingdom now. In the Lord's Prayer, if you look at it, in the very beginning, it says in Matthew 7, 9-10, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are literally supposed to pray every single day for earth to be more like heaven. We're supposed to pray for heavenly will to happen now. You guys ever catch that? You ever see that? Right? It's literally saying, run this earth like it's being run in heaven. Help me to help run this place like heaven. We're literally supposed to be bringing heaven right now. This is the prayer that we are taught. This is how Jesus taught them to pray. Start this with asking God's will to be done now and start bringing heaven now. Right? It's right there. It's sit there in front of you. Do heaven now. This is where we say, same link. God was speaking to both of us. Matthew 16, 18 to 19. It tells you, and after he asked Peter, who am I? You're the Son of God. Jesus tells him, and I tell you, you are Peter. On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Right there you see, it's like earth and heaven are supposed to be connected. It's supposed to be happening. Everything's supposed to be done. They have the keys to do it now. And it literally tells you right there, not as just Peter's faith and the church are meant to push back hell. When we talk about gates, they're talking about like when you're building protection walls, right? Hell has advanced and took territory and put up these walls to protect it. And he's like, your faith, your trust in Jesus will be able to push them all back. You can take back territory that belonged to hell and is now heaven's territory. We won't have all the earth until until the end, but we're supposed to be pushing and pushing and pushing. Hell can't stop us. Right? It's right there. Jesus is literally telling them, and I love it. Not only does he tell Peter, but he says the church. This is what you will do. You will push back against hell and start making heaven. Is that right? It's right there. We're supposed to be making heaven here on earth. And so for a lot of us, we talk about this, right? Like, I don't know how much you believe it, but for me, I know there's hell on earth. Seen it, been there, right? I'm a soldier. I've been to war. Iraq, Afghanistan. I've been to some of the countries in Nicaragua, some of these areas in Central America where all the sex slavery, all that stuff, right? All these fighting. So I've seen a lot of bad stuff. So I've seen hell on earth. And a lot of people in those areas that what they're going through, they'll tell you, this is hell on earth. So if there can be hell on earth, there can be heaven on earth. Right? We're stuck in the middle, and God's like, make a choice. What are you going to push for? Are you going to stop, not do anything, and just let hell keep advancing? Or are you going to keep trying to push heaven on earth to free them? Because honestly, hell on earth is not as bad as the real hell. Heaven on earth is not as good as the real heaven. They're all just a taste of it. And it's and God's asking, what do you want? What are you going to fight for? And so for me, like, this is what I believe God has always called me to do, right? To fight to put heaven on earth. The reason why I became a soldier after 9/11, all the things that happened, right? All the deaths, knowing what people were going through, the suffering, the fears, I wanted to go stop that. I wanted to go fight. And so for me, I've shared a lot of stories of war zones and things like that I've seen, right? I've seen God come through in so many ways. And so some people, they're like, man, he's so upbeat about it, right? He's having fun, he's laughing, right? He's doing all these things. Like it doesn't even seem that hard, that what he went through. And so the reason why, number one, you're hearing stories after God met me in those moments to get me out of them, right? So you're always hearing the best part of it because God's already been there with me. Does that make sense? But trust me, the initial reaction is as bad as it can get, right? War, there's a reason why we call war going to hell and back, right? It is as bad as, it's worse than you can ever imagine, right? The feeling of the heat, the explosions, the ripple effects, right? Every single thing that it goes to you, there's no way to describe it. I could do pretty well at describing it, but trust me, I don't want to describe it to you. I would never want you to even know how bad it truly is. Because trust me, there's a reason why it's hell on earth. All right, so when I tell these stories, that's where it's kind of like, I'm trying to show you how God got me through it, but it's important to understand, believe me, when those things happen, you feel it all. You feel every single negative feeling, you feel all this stuff. In those moments, that's when you have to then take it to God, right? As all these explosions going on, right? Your heart's dropping out of your chest, or even sometimes it feels like your heart just got knocked out of you, right? There's so many things that's just going on, so much pain, so much suffering, right? So much evil that you feel, and you're just sitting there like stuck. And that's where it's like, as you're stuck, you kind of look around to your brothers and sisters in arms, and they're all feeling the same thing. Every single one of them has that blank face. What did we just see? What are we feeling? What is happening? And so in those moments when it's so bad, that's when I would be like, God, help me with this. Help me in that way, not only to help me, but help me find a way to make sense for this everybody else. Right? So that's where God would answer. He'd be like, man, you know what you're fighting for. You know what you're doing. You know what this means to sacrifice for others, right? He would hit me with all those verses, all these scriptures, and that's what would snap me back in place. Okay, I get it. I know why I'm doing this. And then that's where I could talk to my people. Hey, because I heard from God, we could do this. Because I know we're doing it for this reason, this is how it helped, right? And so that's how all my stories are so positive, because God answered me in those moments. But trust me, you feel it, and you have to make that choice. Are we just going to go down in despair? Are we just going to make it worse, feel worse and worse and worse? Or are we going to try to fight and make heaven on earth here through this experience? Does that make sense? And so for me, that's where like God obviously helped me in those extreme situations, but that's where God's like, use every single day you get to bring heaven on earth to all these people. So I'm going to share a little bit of how even in the middle of hell, God was helping me to help them see heaven on earth. And so as we would have all these tough moments, I shared with you guys, right, there was 30 days where they basically unleashed all the bombs on us, right? They told us there was going to be 30 days where we'd be lucky to survive, right? So in the third day, they killed 30 people in one swing, right? And so day after day, this is happening. So about 2 weeks in, we've lost so many people. All our food supplies have been cut off, right? We're barely getting by, right? And so all we had was a bunch of hamburgers, like ground beef, right? So normally we had all these different food stations, but the one thing, like the emergency was like, always have ground beef. You can make hamburgers, and that'll always feed soldiers. They'll be happy, right? So as everybody's miserable, everybody's suffering, everybody does not believe in the next day, right? They're like, man, they've lost hope. They're like, how do we deal with this? And so I remember I was like, for me, it's all about feeding people, right? Like I feed everybody now. Everybody knows how much I pour into it. But the reason why I started, it was because of in Iraq, right? I saw this. And so I remember for us, all we were eating was burgers for a couple of days for lunch and dinner. And the guys were like, man, this sucks, right? Like, this is our last day. We want to eat something good. And so in the mornings, we have a small, decent breakfast where it's like eggs, sausage, bacon, potatoes, right? That's all we would have. And so, and then they would just serve burgers at lunch and dinner. And so I was like, hey, guys, I got an idea. I was like, we can make some bacon cheeseburgers. And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, I found some Ziplocs in our storage. We have a bunch of Ziplocs to keep our gear safe so it doesn't get wet, right? And so I was like, man, we're in the middle of a desert. Like, we don't need none of our gear. There's no water. Like, we're running out of water. Like, we don't have to worry about this. I was like, we can use these Ziplocs to get some food. And they're like, yeah. I was like, yeah, we'll use the Ziplocs to get bacon in the morning, and then we'll bring it back at lunch so we can have bacon cheeseburgers. And they're like, what are you talking about putting food in Ziploc? I was like, let me tell you what it was like growing up in the ghetto, right? I was like, we always had to, take the leftovers and all this other food. And so I was telling them, like, when I was a kid, we would always go to all-you-can-eat buffets. And so I was like, I would always bring Ziplocs to take food home with me, right? And so some of you might be like, Joaquin was stealing food. No. I always had a loophole, right? So when I went with my family, I could out-eat every single one of them. And so when we were at these restaurants, after a couple hours, they would want to go home, right? They're like, why is Joaquin still eating? And they're like, you've had enough. We're just going to go home. Like, we don't want to sit here waiting for you to finish. And so I would take food home with me so I could finish eating at home. Because technically, I paid for all I can eat. Does that make sense, right? So I brought the food home, so all I can eat, right? And so I was telling him, I was like, yeah, I've always brought these Ziplocs, right? Like, just put them in pockets, just be cool about it, right? Like, don't make any faces, right? And so I got all this bacon for us in breakfast. So when lunch came, right, I was like, man, here we go. Everybody take a couple slices, right? So we get that, but we get our bacon cheeseburgers made. And it's like when we first, all of us take that first bite into it, it's like, right? Like, oh my goodness. Like, this is home. We were like, this bacon cheeseburger is the best burger I've had in my life, right? Every one of us were like, man, this is so special right now. And so we started talking about where our favorite burger was back in the States, right? All these things like, oh, man, when we go back, you should come to my hometown. You should eat this burger, right? Listen. And so we're just having the time of our life eating these bacon cheeseburgers. And we had that little bit of heaven in hell. Does that make sense? And so every day, that's what we started doing. We started bringing food, bringing Ziplocs, making all that stuff. So it was just fun. We made the best out of that situation. And we got closer because we really were just talking about everything back home, all the meals we couldn't wait to have. Does that make sense? And so that's where it was like, it was just God like, man, feed them, find a way to just cheer them up, find a way to do something special for them. Right? So he was like, bring heaven on earth. And so that's what helped me understand why I did the war, why I loved it, because I could be there for people in the worst times and help them through it. Right? So when I went to Afghanistan, it was similar situations. Right? So I was in a small base again. And so when it was getting really hot, a lot of action, we were running out of supplies, and so we didn't really have any coffee, especially not any good coffee. I was telling people that we filter coffee through dirty socks sometimes. Like, it's not good, right? And so you just do what you got to do, right? You need caffeine when you're working days at a time. And so when we were there, like one of the guy's wives sent him a Keurig machine, right? And so back then, this was back in 2014, right? So this is when they first kind of came out. They're getting popular. And so the wife sent him a Keurig, like, I want to cheer up my husband. Things are so bad and so dire. I want to, he loves coffee. I would love to send him this machine. She didn't realize that there's no K-Cups in Afghanistan, right? And there's no store you can go buy it from. And so my friend's like, man, that's really thoughtful of my wife, but I can't do nothing with it. And he's like, I would love to have a cup of coffee, like a really good cup of coffee. And he's like, Joaquin, man, that's what I'm, if you can make something happen for you, make that happen. I was like, I'll see what I can do. And so as we're there, right, we were very high up tempo doing all this kind of work, this big old project. So I was very busy, but I met these other groups. They're like, hey, can we get some help? Like, we need to improve our housing, right? Like, get more showers, things like that. We're trying to bring in more troops for protect safety, but we need help building stuff. And so they're like, you think you can help? I was like, yeah, I'll come on my time off. I'll come at night, come check out everything. I'll see what I can do to help you guys. Maybe get some volunteers to build some stuff for you. And so as I went to go help this extra unit, when I'm going through all their buildings, getting all the measurements, looking at what I can expand, I end up seeing a bunch of boxes of K-Cups, those Keurig cups, right? And I was like, hey, man, like, what's up with these cups? And so this was the National Guard from Connecticut, Vermont area. And he's like, we're actually from the area where Green Mountain Coffee's at, right? It's like, so they've been sending us all these K-Cups to thank us for our service to this country. He's like, but none of us have a K-Cup machine, right? Like, none of us thought to bring a K-Cup machine to war. And I was like, God, right? I was like, hey, man, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. We just had a friend that got a K-Cup machine sent in. How about I take all these boxes, and anytime you guys want coffee, come to our homes, come to our places, our tents, right? And we'll make it for you anytime you want. And it's like, deal, right? So I took these 2 big old boxes of K-Cups. And so everybody is in our tent, right? It's like 40 of us in the tent. I was like, hey, man, you guys said you want some coffee, right? And it's like, yeah. It's like, you think this will do? And I just slid that box in right of all the K-Cups. I was like, oh! Right, so we're celebrating. We just started drinking tons of cups of coffee. None of us got sleep that night because we were like 4 or 5 cups in a row, right? But we just stayed up all night talking, right? We were just having this fun. In the middle of the war zone, just having fun. And so they were like, man, and so I was telling them, like, in Iraq, we used to have all these muffins. I don't know if you guys know the Otis Spunkmeyer muffins. Those are kind of old-fashioned, but basically they have like these little individual packaged muffins, a blueberry, double chocolate chip, banana nut, apple cinnamon. They're very good, especially when you cut them open, put some butter on them. Right? And so in Iraq, we had unlimited snacks back then. That's when the Army had a big budget. So in Afghanistan, we had none of this. And so I was like, man, you guys don't know what it was like. We used to have all the muffins we wanted, right? And so as we're talking about drinking this coffee, it's like, we would kill for some muffin. And I'm like, I can make, like, Joaquin, you think you can make it happen? I was like, I'll see what I can do. Right? So I ended up looking it up. I found you could order them from Office Depot, right? So I ended up having them shipped out. And so I ended up calling the guy that's in charge of the mail. I was like, hey, man, because it's very slow to get mail, right? And so I was like, hey, if you keep one of those boxes, you think you could put the other couple ones on that truck right away, right? So I'm making all these deals, like, just hook us up, we'll hook you up with some muffins. So that's what the guy did. We got them within a couple days, right? So as I have these muffins, I hid them outside the tent, and I grabbed a whole new re-up of these K-Cups. And so I brought the K-Cups to all these guys, right? And so I was like, yeah, man, I got a re-up. And they're kind of like, oh, okay. And I was like, what? They're like, we hadn't had our heart set on muffins too, right? Coffee and muffins, right? Greedy. And so I'm like, what? You guys doubted me? So I walked out, and they're like, oh, man. And so they were like, oh, did we hurt his feelings? And so I opened the door, and I had the box of muffins, and I just threw them all at them, right? So I just showered them, and they're like, oh! They're like, the muffins! Right? And so I was like, that's right. I was like, I even got butter from the dining facility, right? Like, let's start. And so we were microwaving them, putting butter. Man, we just had the time of our life. Middle of hell, middle of war, coffee and muffins, all it took. And butter. That butter is very crucial, right? But that's what we were just talking about. What are we going to have when we get back home? What's our favorite dessert, right? All these type of things. And so that's where I was kind of like, there is ways to bring heaven here on earth. There's ways to really be there for people, build community, right? Just us talking, us being able to share over a cup of coffee. That's all it took for us to endure what we were going through. To know we had people fighting with us, people that were willing to sacrifice, right? All these type of things. That's all it took, just really sharing together, sharing our burdens, sharing all this stuff. And so that's why for me, like God, I'm always thankful God sent me to war for that reason, right? Because he solidified my faith. He got me through all those moments. He always established I was fighting for heaven. Right? And which is why I then did ministry. He's like, God's like, you love that taste of it? How about you do it all the time? I was like, what job does that? And he's like, ministry. Right? And that's why I've been working with all these different churches, and I've been able to keep doing that. And so as we have this idea, we got to believe in it, that we can start heaven on earth now. But we have to know how to do it. How is this possible to bring heaven on earth? And Paul kind of tells you in this verse what you need to do. And in that last point, it says he's choosing what's necessary for others over what is better for him. Right? You have to choose necessary for others over what's best for you. In those verses, he tells you in verse 23, Paul knows heaven is far better for him. He says, I'm hard-pressed between the two. My desire is to depart with Christ, for that is far better. He knows to be in heaven is the best. We know heaven is the best. He knows it for himself. That will be the best thing for himself. But he says, I want to stay. 25, convinced of 24 and 25. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. He knows to stay is going to benefit them, but cost him something. Paul gives you his choice. We're going to talk about this next week. I don't want to steal Pastor Chang's sermon because that's verse 25. But he basically says, convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and joy in the faith. Paul literally says, I want to choose what's best for you over what's best for me. I will fight for heaven now for you over me going to heaven for myself. That's what it takes. The sacrifice. Putting others first. That's what you're talking about, all the support, right? All the things that people do. I've worked with people in war zones. I worked with a family from Ukraine years ago when Crimea first got taken over. But their family, they stayed on the border. There were some Christians. He was a worship pastor who I met in San Francisco at a church, but his mom stayed in Ukraine. And she came to witness to us, talk to us about what was going on. But they stayed so that they could help people get across borders, be able to shelter them for a while and then transport them. Right? We saw this in World War II, different places, but people sacrificed themselves, their protection for others. Because that's how they believe they'll get heaven. Does that make sense? That's why Christians, why we're supposed to risk our lives. For that reason. We already got heaven in the bank. It's guaranteed. Help somebody else get it. Give up something that will be your comfort. Give up something for them. Because honestly, somebody gave up something for us to have heaven. That's where it's supposed to be a cycle going over and over again. Started with Jesus, and every one of us is supposed to keep that mission going. All the apostles did it. Paul did it, obviously, right? Because that's what I'm saying. It's so important to understand his situation was he's suffering. Most of us, we don't want to give up a lot of our comforts or what we want. We're not even suffering. We ain't even beaten for our faith. It's not even on the table to die for our faith. And we're not ready. And Paul's like, I'm losing everything, and I'm ready to give it. And so that's the heart that we're supposed to have. That's the desire. To really choose what's necessary for others over what's better for us. And so this is something that we see in Scripture, even after Jesus passes and comes back and gives them the Holy Spirit. This is what we see in Acts. We see this community create heaven by putting others first. So in Acts 2, 42 to 47, it tells you, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. We see this. They gave up all this extra stuff, right? If you really understand the context, they didn't just sell everything and had zero. As soon as somebody had something that needed something, they sold what they could to make sure they were not in need. Everybody minimized what they needed. Does that make sense? You don't need dim sum twice a week like some people you might know. Right? I get it once a month, right? But that's where it's like you eat a little bit less. You have a little bit of less clothes. Things like that, right? You sacrifice tiny things to help other people in need. Paul will talk about this in later where he's like, you don't have to sacrifice to where you suffer endlessly, but if every single person was sacrificing a little bit, nobody would have to sacrifice everything. The problem is only a few are sacrificing, which means they have to sacrifice everything because not everybody's sacrificing a little. But if a community of everybody sacrifices a little, then every need gets met. They showed that. They've established that. All these groups from different places. It's important to understand Pentecost was a gathering of people from all different regions, different languages. And yet they still were in this mindset. We want heaven now. We're fighting back against this. We've been divided for so long. We had so much division before Christ came, before we had this Holy Spirit. Not anymore. The walls have been broken between us and God, but even between us and each other. Let us be one. And they started doing that. And so this really does come from giving up yourself. Paul will talk about this more with this humility of being like Christ, because this is in Philippians 2-6. I won't cover it fully now because it's like I said, it's our sermon in 2 weeks. But basically it says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. Jesus emptied himself for us. Jesus became a servant for us to have heaven, right? That's what it came down to. He emptied himself fully so we could have heaven. He took all the pain. He took all the suffering. He endured every single thing so that we could have heaven. He put us above what was best for him. But honestly, what's best for Jesus was all of us to be in heaven with him. That's where in your mindset, that's what it comes down to. Why is this what's best for me? Why is this a sacrifice? When in reality, it's like the biggest thing that's best for us is for everybody to be together. Everybody to have harmony. Everybody to have love. There's no sacrifice for us to be taking care of each other. That's the evolution of our hearts as Christians, right? And we'll get into that more and more, but it's important to understand Jesus set that tone where this is the mindset we're supposed to have. Give up our comfort so people can have heaven now. And so it's not something that, we're supposed to take lightly, but it's something that we're supposed to cherish. It's not something we're supposed to be forced into. Like, we really should want to do things to bring heaven to people on earth. For me, when I was preparing this, we had a drive-by for Jethro. And so Jethro he got leukemia last year. And so his family, they're all quarantined, right? And so they haven't been able to see the church in person, right? And so somebody organized driving by his house. Just all these cars decorating, all this other stuff, right? Just saying hi, cheering him up, all this stuff, be able to feel that connection. And so when we were there, when I first heard about this, I was like, oh, it's going to be like our church, right? Like 10, 20 cars just driving by his house. And so it turned out there was all these people from all these other churches. People from like the school that he went to, the Fremont Christian School, things like that, right? And so it was tons of cars. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, man, this is what heaven's going to look like. This is a taste of heaven right now. Because they want to share love to this person. They want to share love to this family. They want to share joy with this family. Everybody came together, sacrificed time on their days off, or all these things, to come together to share this love. Right? All these people from different backgrounds, all these different people from different churches, just coming together to share that little bit of heaven. Right? And it was very moving. I was like, man, this is crazy. This is what's talked about. This is what we see in the old days, but it's still present. It's just tiny little things. Tiny little sacrifices is all it takes. But if enough people do tiny sacrifices, it just becomes tremendous. Right? And so as we've seen these people come together, it's like, man, we're just moving. That's why I was like, you could sense heaven right there on earth. We're trying to make it. Right? Even Jethro, I was like, man, this guy's just cheering everybody up, right? He's having, like, he makes all of us feel stronger and fight more. Right? Because even as I was hearing all the people, why they were there, some of them were like, oh, yeah, I met him a couple months. I started teaching him at FCS here. Or, he was in this, and then before he went and left, right? And it's like all it took was a couple months for him to kind of impact all these people's lives and just bring everybody together. And I was like, man, Jethro is really special because he's basically bringing everybody together like we would in heaven. And he's doing it right now with his fight, with his courage, with his strength. And so I was like, man, I was just inspired. I was like, man, I got to fight harder. This guy's doing it just, he's just doing it right now in the only way he can. And so I was like, man, we should be inspired to know we can do this. We can create it now on earth. It just comes down to what choice are we going to make? What are we going to fight for? And so I'll end with these applications for you. Right, tonight, number one, thank God in your prayers for all the people he has put in your life who have helped bring a little bit of heaven to your life. Thank Jesus for being the example of all of them to sacrifice and put our needs above their own. So spend the time with Jesus, thanking him for this ability, right, and his strength to do this. Number two, list out all the people who bother you at church. Pray for the strength to show them love. Ask for the ability to see Christ in them, and pray that God will answer their prayers and bless them. I'll be honest. We know there's people we don't get along with at church, right? You're like, some of them are allowed to be up front. but that's why we're supposed to work on it. This is what we're supposed to be fighting for. What's best for everybody else? Let me pray for them. We might not be able to talk about every single thing in life, but we should be praying for each other. We should be hoping that their faith is growing stronger, that they're really growing in the unity with Christ, and then hopefully that leads to us being more united. But that's what we're supposed to be doing as a church. We can't even help the world yet if we're not even helping ourselves to be united, right? We're supposed to be united so that we can help even more places, even more things. We combine more strengths. And so take this to Jesus, take this to God, to really work with these people that you don't get along with now. Number 3, spend time with people outside of church. Find ways to grab some tea, food, recreational activity to help share more of your life and faith. Try to plan at least once a month to do this, then bi-monthly, then weekly. Don't settle for just those who are close to you. Try to work on hanging out with more people you don't regularly talk with. So we're going to pray to be more united, but then you got to take actions to try to be more united. If you look at the Acts where they're all together sharing everything, it literally tells you that they're meeting in the temple and then they're going home and breaking bread in their homes together. Right? Most of us, we just have unity here at church and then we go back home and we're back in our own little lives. We can get a little bit of heaven here and then back when our homes is gone. And that's God's like, no, interconnect all them houses. Make heaven here and there, all these pockets, and then you just keep spreading out through all the regions around you or in between you. But that's what community is supposed to look like, always spending time together. And so I know it's not easy. I know everybody's busy, but that's the sacrifice, right? If you're going through something hard, you hope people will sacrifice time to meet with you and talk with you. Do the same for others. Make time for them. Make the sacrifice. I could have more. I could do this. I could have something that I want to do. But if somebody, make yourself available so that you can meet and really build heaven here on earth. That's what I say. The sacrifices are easy. We don't even have to go to the cross yet, right? We can literally just love people more and more, spend time with them, give up certain things right now in our lives to make heaven here on earth. And so this is where it's at. Like, it's all about preparation for heaven. You should be preparing to really be close together, right? I was thinking about this where, like, even the youth, right? Like, we'll be up in heaven. Well, even for myself, right? Like, when I get to heaven, I was like, I can imagine all these people just waiting, right? Like, there'd be like all these lines, like, hey, he made it. So like when somebody gets up to heaven in the clouds, you see like the names pop up, like, hey, this person made it, right? Everybody's like, oh, okay. And so when my name when it's finally my turn to come up, it'd be like, Joaquin Chavez. The sign will start glitching, like, uh-oh, right? And it's like, everybody, attention, right? Like, Joaquin Chavez is coming to heaven. I said it, be Joaquin Chavez. They're like, oh my, they're like, we remember hearing stories about this guy. We know how wild, right? All these things be like, did he really make it? Everybody will be there waiting, right? All these people. And so I've shared, I work with all these different cultures. It's like my waiting line will look like the United Nations, where it's like all these different people, all these different groups, thousands of soldiers, all these people, where it's like, this is the guy that helped, like, try to make heaven on earth, right? So we'd be all doing our handshakes, like, ta, 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 all these special handshakes that we have. Even when I get to God, we'll have our own special handshakes, like, ta, 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 ta. It's like, ah, right? Like, man, we brought some heaven, right, to earth, right? But that's where it's like that celebrating. And so even after we celebrate, it's like spending time together in heaven, doing all the stuff that we did here on earth. There's a game that we play, it's called Blood on the Clock Tower. And so I was like, there's going to be some blood on the clock tower in heaven. If you don't know this game, it's about trying to find evil people and take them down, right? And so when people are going to be like, there's blood on the clock tower in heaven, God's going to be like, that's right. It's like, who do you think invented helping people find evil people and taking them down? It's like, God's like, that's my jam. That's what I love to do, right? I want to help people find evil people and take them down. Stop them. It's like, of course we're going to be playing this game, building that skill. It's like, I can't believe you guys never caught Joaquin lying. It was so obvious. His first lie is always, he's like, just like the serpent. His first statement was going to be a lie. But there's all these other things, right? Like some of us play spike ball. It's this little game like volleyball. It's like we'll be playing spike ball in heaven, right? We'll be 2v2, me and God versus you and Jesus, right? It'll be like old versus young, right? We'll just be playing the same games, having fun with all the people that we've met on earth. That's how I look at heaven. More and more people united, but we don't have to wait till then. We can literally do all those things now, right? We can keep playing all those games, getting closer, loving each other, supporting each other. One of the youth, I was asking, like, and somebody was like, my mom makes the best Chinese food. And so I was like, can we get an invite? It's like, nope, right? So, so technically, I've only been to two youth's homes for dinner. And sadly, they're both in the same family. I've only been to one house of the youth for 3 years, right? It's like, hey, the scripture says we're supposed to be breaking bread together, right? So I have a strategy to try to get to eat more with more homes and with the youth. So Isabel was the one that said this, right? I don't mean to call you out, but I got it, because I need to use your parents as an example. I got to get the parents to invite me. So her mom's always here on Fridays dropping them off. She sees the food, smells it, right, that I make on Fridays. So I'm going to try to find out what her favorite dish is, and I'm going to make it. And be like, you should try it. And so I want to make it so good that she's like, I got to have this again. I want Joaquin to come over, right? And then I got to convince their dad to invite me. So their dad, Wu Jen, right, he was a children's Sunday school teacher. And so I'm going to be like, Wu Jen, do you remember the 2 most troublesome kids when you were teaching Sunday school? And he'd be like, yeah, those 2 kids, Victor and Lola. And I'd be like, yeah, those 2 kids I'm going against in a baking competition. I need to crush that person. You said Isabel's a great baker. You think she'll be able to help me? And he'll remember how much Victor and Lola terrorized him. And he'd be like, yes, I want to help get some revenge on that kid. Or those kids, sorry. And he's like, you should come over and let Isabel teach you. And then that way, I get to have dinner with the family. She's like, no. Right? But everybody. We went hiking to do Mission Peak, the senior group. And so we went up there. We ended up meeting Aaron's parents up at the top. We're like, we'll take pictures for you. You go take pictures of us, right? It was just kind of fun, kind of cool unity thing where it's like, hey, they wanted to go hike when it first snowed, and we did too. And it was like, but we all got to meet up there and just spend time, laugh a little bit, right? And we went our ways for different meals. But that's where it's like, that's what heaven's supposed to be. All these great opportunities to come together, love each other, support each other. But the most important thing to understand is we don't need to wait. It's literally at our feet right now. It's literally in our hands to start making this happen in any little way possible. And so we'll talk about this over the next couple of weeks about how we're supposed to fight for this, how we're supposed to do with this. But we should have that desire, that tension in our heart that I don't want to go yet. I want to make heaven as much as I can here until it's my time to be up with Jesus. So it's my time to go to heaven. Until then, I need to make sure everybody's having this possible. And this can be done in your schools, in your homes, right, in church, in your neighborhoods. All these different ways you can start making heaven now. But you have to want it. You have to really want it and understand that is what Jesus wants. That's why he literally says to live is Christ. Christ was all about doing that for others. All of us want to follow him. All of us want to be like him. That's all we have to do. And everything else will take care of itself. And so hopefully you have this same desire. But for me, I'm trying to be very firm and understand like we should have this passion, but you have made heaven here now. Right? This is a special place. This church does a lot. We have all these pockets where we're trying to make heaven, but we just need to expand it. We need to add more people, right? It's already being done. The youth, man, I love Fridays. For me, it's always a little piece of heaven. The young adults, right? Even all the groups that are here. I don't get to know all the adults that as well because I spend a lot of time with them. But what you've made here, the opportunities that we have to create heaven for them is because of you guys. Everything that you've made, poured into, sacrificed for. Everything that you've put forward for them. Right? Even for supporting missions, all these things, you're showing them to keep fighting for heaven everywhere. You're showing them to sacrifice that heart. And so we have it now. It's just we still need more. We know what this world's like. We need more. And so, for me, I'll end just thanking the youth, right? I told you guys, I was a battle-weary, old, broken down man. I didn't have much fight left in me, right? It's just, like I said, I fought hard. I don't deny it. But it was always like, I always ask God, do you think I can still keep fighting for heaven like I did before? I ain't feeling it like I have. I haven't had the same type of resolve like I have before. I don't feel that tension no more. Part of me started leaning towards wanting heaven. It's never been like that before. And so what you guys bring every single week, it feels like heaven here on earth. And so for me, that's why I want to fight. It makes me want to fight harder to make heaven for you guys, or make it bigger, right? So I'm not torn no more. I'm fully sold out in making heaven for you guys and doing it with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing your guys' future, where everywhere you go, you keep making heaven everywhere you go. And so for all of us, I hope you commit to that. And so I just ended it with this kind of bold statement. Live your life for Christ, with Christ, and like Christ. If you do that, we will see a lot more heaven here on earth. So please join me as we close in prayer.